This is a content video on Chapter 5 and framing. And previously we talked about bounded awareness. And I think this example here might link both bounded awareness and framing. So if you could, take a pause for a moment, read the instructions here, pause the video, read the instructions and see if you can solve this. And then we'll pick back up with the solution here in a moment. Okay, so hopefully you've taken a moment to look at that. And the solution here may not be as obvious, but the idea is that if you disconnect or cut these three, you can then use each individual one as a connection across the three opening points. Or if you look at the bottom here, right, you take one of them, you disconnect all three, you can then connect the others all together and stay within budget. I mean, this was done with cents instead of ours was dollars, but I just wanted to show you a visual of this. The idea here is that, you know, we probably need to reframe the way we see things, right? When others are framing things for us, because really, if you look at this, this was framed for us in a certain way and probably led us to struggle with this. But stepping outside of their framing or reframing things by stepping outside of the way others impose constraints, something that can be incredibly helpful for us. And I mean, this kind of framing effect of how, say, other people frame things to us or set things up, or how we may do that to others, is a cognitive bias, right? It does have an impact on how we make decisions. A common one is how if things are framed as a loss or a gain, people tend to avoid risk. So they want things framed as a positive when they see risks, when things are framed as a negative. So the positive versus negative framing is a big one. Here's an example here. If I asked you, do you know what milk fat percentage whole milk is? Take a moment to think about that. So here's the actual answer to what whole milk is. It's 3.25%. But you may not necessarily realize that because things are framed often like option 1, whole milk 2%, 1%, and skim milk. It might lead you to believe that whole milk is such a higher percentage milk fat than 2% milk. It's really not that different. And the interesting thing about how this framing decision is made is that people get overwhelmed sometimes with too many numbers. You may think, oh, those 4 numbers are pretty easily for me to handle, but others do get overwhelmed with it. So in situations where you're presenting 4 options, having a couple as numbers and a couple as words is a way to frame things in a way that helps people to understand it. So framing can be a positive thing, and/or framing can be something that works with our bias in a way that influences us. One of the ways that framing is huge to us is when we see things framed just by themselves or framed with additional information. So in the situation below, if you were asked to take which job would you more likely to take, and you saw both options A and B, if you see both options here, most people would do the math, add things up, and realize that, oh, option A pays me more over the 3-year period, so that makes more sense. Most people would say that. But if these were presented separately, when these are presented separately, most people choose option B, because it just looks like it's a thing that makes more sense, that while I'm there, I'd make more money. And would choose that option when they're presented separately. So the interesting thing that I want to share with this is that framing really does highlight oftentimes our system 1 thinking, where we very intuitively make a decision based on one factor, and that factor is often exactly how things are framed for us. We may not take that step back and consider, wait, what else is going on here that I don't know based on the way this is being framed? And that's why actually when you present more information, people move into system 2 thinking or rational based decision, because now you're like, oh, I have a couple different things I need to compare, and it transitions us. So again, framing what I just want to share here, it's a powerful thing, and we may not necessarily realize how often that goes on. We might feel, oh, this is definitely the case in advertising, for example, because advertising would be, and sales, because these would be areas where framing is huge, and it is. But it also goes on, and it also occurs in so many different areas of our life, like many things that are internet-based, where they're saving our preferences and such. and customizing things to us. That is a form of framing. All right, well, I thank you for listening. Try to keep this at a high level and provide a couple examples, trying different things for the videos to keep them brief, but help to understand the overall premise of what we're talking about this week. Thank you. Bye.